Hey plant friends! Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Darylyn, and today we are going to be discussing a topic that has been coming up very prevalently in the plant community, both on YouTube and in some of the groups, and with my plant friends that I talk to a lot in real life as well. And that is plant burnout. Following the great houseplant and especially aroid boom of the COVID era, it's starting to get to the point now where it seems like a number of people who got into the hobby are getting sick of their plants, downsizing their collections, completely liquidating their collections, just exiting the hobby altogether. I think there's a lot of reasons why some people are doing this, and this is true, there are some people that are doing this. However, I don't actually know of any personal plant friends of mine that are doing so, and the plant YouTube community seems to be thriving just as much as they ever were. But all in the same, I still do hear grumblings about being burned out with your plants, not finding as much joy from them, not having as much time for them, just general frustrations, being dissatisfied. And I think there's a lot of reasons why, and maybe if we discuss them a little bit, we can kind of help each other to get more enjoyment out of our plants and to maybe reduce the number of people that are burning out of the hobby. I personally absolutely love plants. They're so soothing, they're so much fun, but I have also kind of intentionally slowed down bringing plants into my personal collection. I am in the process of opening a plant shop. Who knows when that will ever be, but I am for that bringing a lot of plants in still. So I can tell you it does get to be overwhelming to care for them all. But in general, a lot of people are scaling back. And I think one of the first reasons is that a lot of people got into plant collecting in the first place because of the aesthetic that they saw on Instagram and Pinterest, and actually just in a lot of advertisements in general. The planty urban jungle aesthetic had a really prominent moment back in 2019 going into 2020, and then everyone found themselves locked down at home for such a long time. I do think a lot of people started trying to decorate their space more, make it more planty to get that urban jungle vibe because they like the aesthetic, and that's totally fine and understandable. Like, that doesn't make you less valid as a plant parent or a plant collector if you originally got into the hobby because you like the aesthetic. I'm not gonna lie, I personally, that's how I got into collecting plants, was that I really liked that aesthetic. I still really like that aesthetic. However, that aesthetic is really difficult to actually achieve, especially quickly, because a lot of these plants that you see people have in these pictures, they're big, mature plants. They're really hard to get in that state right away. Most of these people have been growing those plants for years and years and years. Even just like a giant vining jade pothos or a golden pothos, or even with those types of really accessible garden center plants, it takes a really long time for them to achieve those jungle vibes that you see on Instagram. And I think that a lot of people just got frustrated with it not achieving the look that they wanted. And unfortunately, patience as a human being is not our strongest, quality for many of us. And so in order to achieve that vibe, they were like, oh, I need to buy more plants, more plants, more plants. And it just didn't come out like they thought it was going to, and they're just really dissatisfied with it. And so I think that is one reason why people are just kind of burning out on plants and moving away from plants, is because when you put a plant on your wish list, you see it. And a lot of times the plants that you see and fall in love with are the absolute best of the best specimens. They're bigger, they're more mature, the leaves are more perfect, the variegation is brighter, and that's just not going to be something that is attainable quickly for most people. And so that brings us to our next reason, which piggybacks off of, not being able to achieve your aesthetic as quickly as possible. And that is the clutter. I hate clutter. And I'm constantly struggling to make my plant spaces and where my plants are look aesthetically pleasing, or at least aesthetically tolerable to me. But it's really, really difficult, especially if you live somewhere small, which I do. I don't have a ton of space. It's really difficult to keep not only my plants looking uncluttered, but also all of the plant materials and plant things that I need for them. One thing that helped me out was getting the grow tent, because a lot of stuff can go in there out of sight, out of mind, but I still have tons of plants throughout my house and, propagating in Dixie cups. And I know what always happens is that you get grow lights for a special plant and it looks fine at first. But sooner or later, what always ends up happening is that you'll have a place in your house with a grow light and it started out with just a few there. And then that grow light space becomes very premium and all of a sudden all your plants are smushed underneath your grow light. So it is really difficult to avoid that. And I really do not like that aesthetic. I don't like clutter. I really have a hard time focusing around a lot of clutter. And so I get it. People are looking around their spaces and they don't like it and they're sick of the clutter and they're sick of the plants that, you know, they imported or had shipped to them looking like garbage, and they realize that they grow really fast and they have to replace the pots all the time, and it's really, really difficult to keep your pots all streamlined and matching and playing off of one another. Interior design is actually really difficult. You want to feel happy, you want to feel relaxed in your space, and a whole bunch of dying, dead, sad-looking plants in mismatched pots crowded together under grow lights is not really an aesthetic that anyone wants. And it's so easy to fall into that, thinking like, you know, I'm just working towards my plants getting bigger and then everything's gonna look better. Like, it takes a really long time, and sometimes even if your plants are growing, they're not gonna grow at their best. Sometimes people are a little bit resistant to do the things that they need to do to achieve what they want to achieve as far as what the plant is going to look like. So just not getting the results that they want in general, I can see why people would burn out, because doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result can really make you feel crazy sometimes. And this actually leads me into my next thought on the matter, which is that people bit off way more than they could chew during COVID. And I'm not even just talking about beginners. Like, I know people who've been keeping plants for forever who also started buying tons during quarantine because there was nothing else to do. Now they're overwhelmed. Now that the plants are maturing a bit, they need to be repotted, they need fertilized, they got into some special fancy ones, they need special water, they need this, they need that. It's a lot of work to stay on top of, it's a lot of money, and if you ignore it, your plants aren't going to look good, and we just go back to the issue where you're not achieving your aesthetic. And this is especially true if you have a pest outbreak. I am going to be completely open with you to the fact that I dealt with a thrips infestation that just would not go away from about April until September. And let me tell you, that was no fun. They spread everywhere. Tons of my plants got infected. It took a really long time to get rid of them. I finally did. We're finally good, but it sucked. And it would have been a lot easier if I had had fewer plants. And honestly, back then at that time, I really didn't have that many. So I was very fortunate that I was only dealing with it with, 40 plants instead of, 100 plus plants, because I know people who have lost huge portions of their collections to pest infestations because they just had so many plants that they couldn't take care of everybody to the best of their abilities. So keeping your collection small, especially while you're learning about pests, learning about damage, learning about the products, solutions, timeline, quarantining everything, it just makes it so much more manageable. And that way, when you do eventually have an issue, clearing it up or dealing with it is going to be a lot easier. Another thing is mental health. We all know we've been through a really difficult past year or two, even going back up to maybe 4 years ago. It's been crazy times, and mental health is suffering for people in general. But when you put having to do tons and tons of chores to take care of hundreds of plants on top of that, feeling a little bit depressed can have a ripple effect to your collection if you aren't in the mental state to have the energy to take care of things. And then once you start seeing your plants suffering and dying, you start to feel like, oh, I'm not good enough for this, I'm not cut out for this, I have a black thumb, I'm just worthless, do nothing. And I've been there. I've put off watering things, I've put off repotting things, I've put off even picking up sphagnum moss off of my floor when I haven't been feeling up to it or had a lot of anxiety. And I think that people are, swinging one way and getting, the triple digit collection, and then swinging the other way because just unburdening themselves of their plants is making them feel better. And I totally get it. But that's really too bad though, because I think if people had, collected plants at a little bit more reasonable pace and kind of got their systems down and took it, a little bit slower, they probably still could have enjoyed plants indefinitely. So definitely important to take care of your mental health. One of the biggest tips that I've heard from other plant parents over and over again is automate as much stuff as you can. Self-watering pots are awesome. Grow light timers are awesome. There's many, many other things out there that you can implement to make it so you have less to do. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, definitely look into things like that. Self-watering pots are awesome. There's apps where you have grow lights connected to an app, so you can turn all of them off and all of them on with your phone. There's humidifiers that automatically adjust depending on, the humidity levels in the room. So there's things you can do to help prevent plant chore burnout. So I highly recommend looking into those if that is something you feel like you've been struggling with. I mean, another thing that goes without saying too is that Rona is now essentially over in a lot of places. And so I do think people really are out there running around trying to make up for the last 2 years almost of not being able to go to theme parks, not being able to go to concerts, not being able to do indoor gatherings like they used to, not be able to go to restaurants, see their family, fly places, travel. So people have priorities, and 2 years of being locked in the house with plants is fine for me and a lot of other maybe more introverted people, but some people are ready to get out and spread their wings and explore the wide world. And so I completely get it. Like, you don't want to get more plants and have a bigger commitment when you're kind of shifting your focus a little bit. So I think that's completely understandable. It's been rough for all of us, and I think that whatever anyone needs to do to get some joy back into their life, I support that pretty much for the most part. Some people have really questionable interests, so some of those things maybe I don't support, but the world going back to normal was bound to happen eventually. And of course, this was going to ripple into every hobby and every community that was predominantly done alone at home. So I think that we are just seeing a natural swing that was always coming. I don't think it's anything endemic to the plant community. People were bound to want to go and have fun and go bar hopping and see their families and travel and whatnot. Another thing is that once you start getting into collecting plants and you've had them for a while and you have a lot of them and you've experienced the rush of getting a new plant over and over again, the rush just isn't really the same. Like, it's less exhilaration and more just kind of satisfaction. And some people really like that rush of exhilaration of like hunting a plant down, getting a plant, unboxing a plant, getting a new leaf on a plant. But prolonged exposure to any kind of excitement is going to result in diminishing returns. Pretty much guaranteed. Maybe at this fulfilling satisfaction point in plant collecting, a lot of people are kind of like, I didn't sign up for this. I am a thrill seeker. I want to be exhilarated. And so I'm just over it because I can't buy wish list plants at the same pace as I used to because of space, because of money, because of having less time at home. Maybe there's some people out there who legitimately got every plant that they wanted, that they were interested in, and now they just aren't looking anymore because their list is complete. I mean, there's got to be somebody out there like that, right? It's just not sustainable to be buying plants at the level that a lot of us were in 2020. It doesn't mean that all of those people are getting rid of their plants or are feeling distressed by the amount of plants that they have to take care of. It's just sometimes things just get old, and that's okay. But I do think that, some of the things that we've talked about earlier in the video are a great way for people to kind of avoid that. And the last thing that I want to mention is something that I actually think is pretty insightful. And I've talked to a couple of my friends about this, and they were like, of course, is that a lot of us that are plant collecting are priced out of getting the plants that we actually want. Because let's face it, a lot of these absolutely amazing dream plants are really expensive, and really expensive can be relative to you and your financial situation. Any way you slice it, not being able to afford to buy the plants you actually want and instead buying other things that are not quite the same or things that are not quite as spectacular, I completely get why it's just not that satisfying. I'm very lucky. I have a lot of plant friends. I've gotten some amazing plants via trades. I've gotten some amazing plants that I've purchased outright. But at the same time, there are plants that I absolutely desperately want that I'm priced out of. And I have actually considered buying some plants that are maybe considered a dupe of some of the plants that I'm currently priced out of. But I just know that deep down I'm not going to be as satisfied with them. And so if you are someone who's been buying tons and tons and tons of plants to kind of try and sate that urge to buy the plant that you really want, but that you maybe can't afford or maybe you just can't find. Like, I completely get why you're getting sick of the plants that you have because you never wanted them in the first place. You wanted something else that wasn't attainable. So my advice would be, if it's reasonable, if it's possible, just save up for the exact thing that you want. I promise you, getting the thing you actually want, if it's attainable for you, if it's reasonable for you, but it's going to be so much more satisfying in the long term. And why buy a bunch of stuff that is just a poor substitute for what we really want? Just have a little bit of patience, plan a little bit ahead, save your money, and get that plant that you really want, because in the long run, you're probably going to spend less on one plant you really, really want, especially if you're eventually able to propagate it and maybe sell some cuttings or do some trades. So that is my 2 cents on plant burnout, some reasons why people are burned out, and maybe a few little tips on how to stave off burnout. If you liked this video, please give it a like, maybe even subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm. That is going to be it for me today. I hope to see everybody in my next one. Bye!